world changes soon. Can get a doobie on a plane, but there's Uzis in our schools. Every dude who touched a boob or a booty getting me too. What you expect from the kids who went to Hooters after school? We're all triggered and defensive. We're all racist. And
Welcome to the Red Pill Sports and Entertainment Show. I am your host, Albert Apache, and as usual, brought to you by Open Source Self-Defense, Fitness, and Grappling. Okay, guys, so today's show, we're going to talk a little bit about Deontay Wilder, some of the allegations he's made about what happened in his loss to Tyson Fury and what Tyson Fury has to say. I personally think that it's just crazy. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We're also going to talk a bit about Jon Jones and some of the things that he's saying. Even though he seems to be moving up to heavyweight, he seems to be keeping a very close eye, some very close reins on the 205-pound division, the light heavyweights. And then lastly, we're going to talk a little bit about 10th Planet Grappling or Jiu-Jitsu. Or should it be grappling? We'll discuss it. So hold on, we'll get into it. Thank you guys so much for listening. Remember, if you like the show, you think it's fun, you think the topics at least spark discussion, please share it, like the video, subscribe, and let's go ahead and start getting into the show. Thanks, guys. So, my friends, many of you may or may not have heard that Deontay Wilder made some shocking and, quite frankly, very outrageous claims that, in fact, Tyson Fury had something hard in his glove, maybe an egg weight. If you don't know what an egg weight is, it is literally a weight that is shaped like an egg, and you can place it in your hand. I've heard Joe Rogan talk about it. He likes to shadow box with them, Joe Rogan that is, as a means of working cardio. Apparently, Deontay Wilder now is claiming that Tyson Fury had some such weight in his glove or in his hand during their second fight. He's claiming that the referee was out to get him in the first fight and that he should have had a knockout in the first fight, that he should have never, that Tyson Fury should have not been given a count, that he should have been immediately called a KO, should have not been given a count and given a chance to get up. And finally, Tyson Fury has responded. And I have to say that it does concern me for Deontay Wilder, but before we get to that, let's see what Tyson Fury had to say. Tyson Fury, and I quote, "I think he has lost his marbles. First of all, it was the suit. Then it was the bicep injury. Then his trainer was on our team. Then the referee was against him. Then I had weights in my gloves. Now someone has spiked his water, and it's one of those things, isn't it?" Okay, so let's go through each one of these that Tyson Fury is referring to. So first of all, it was the suit. For those of you who don't remember, Deontay Wilder wore this gigantic suit into the ring. After the fight, he kind of blamed the suit and the wearing of the suit. It was heavier than he thought it was going to be. It had weakened his legs getting up to the ring. Later, he insisted that he had a bicep injury. Then, of course, it was the disloyal trainer on his side, the guy who actually threw in the towel for him. In my opinion, the only guy who was actually not being a yes man and just collecting a paycheck from Deontay Wilder. The only man that actually had the stones to do what had to be done, because he was getting wrecked in that fight. It doesn't matter, egg weight, no egg weight. Forget whether or not the glove was adjusted by Tyson Fury or his trainer or not, or there was something hard in his glove. The reality was that at the time the guy threw in the towel, it was the best decision for Wilder because he was getting beat up badly. Okay? But, so then it was that guy. Then, of course, he did claim that the referee was against him. and was allowing too much dirty, you know, tactics by Fury. Now, of course, we hear about the egg weights in the glove. And then, most recently, I want to say, he claimed that that particular trainer that is the one that threw in the towel, that apparently he put some kind of muscle relaxers into his water and made him feel, quote, weird. So now it seems we will not get Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder 3. Apparently, Deontay Wilder did have a rematch clause, which he did try to exercise, but due to uh, the Corona Bros and all things Corona, um, that got canceled. It was supposed to go on in July, and of course, the world was in, you know, pseudo lockdown, and so the fight did not happen. Apparently, Tyson Fury and his team claimed that they reached out to Wilder and his team and said, "Okay, let's do it in December." Apparently, they never responded. According to this article here, there was a sunset time period for the rematch clause. So the Wilder team had X amount of days to execute and to accept and to put something together. If that was not done, then Tyson Fury was free to go ahead and move forward. So Tyson Fury has supposedly, according to this story here, has reached out, has set up for another fight against a different opponent that should be announced soon. He'll be fighting in December, if in fact everything is lined up properly. And what can I say about Deontay Wilder? I mean, the biggest part of the problem with Deontay Wilder right now, and those that are Deontay Wilder fans do not want to accept, is that Deontay Wilder is not a great boxer. He's an amazing puncher. He's a freak of nature with power in his hands that he that is just unfathomable, right? That's what Deontay Wilder is. But his skills as a boxer are they're just not there. And there's not really a whole lot more to say about that. The one thing I can say about Deontay Wilder that I think is good for, you know, the public to understand, right, is that boxing as a self-defense art is fake. And how I know there's going to be some boxing fans that just, you know, probably choked and want to reach through the screen and choke me, but hear me out. Deontay Wilder has proven that if you want to stand with somebody and punch and strike, you could outclass that person in skill and technique. Hands down. I mean, look at, for instance, Ortiz. Hands down, a much better boxer. I mean, if we were going to, if you asked me to hire Deontay Wilder or Ortiz to train my son in boxing, by far I would choose Ortiz over Wilder, because Ortiz actually has skill and technique. But what Wilder has shown is that if you're going to stand up and strike with somebody, the longer you stay in the puncher's chance window, the more likely you are to get knocked out by somebody that is not as skilled as you and just has more athletic ability. So as a self-defense art, it's not the best idea, especially because when you're considering that most of the time we're talking self-defense, we're talking about the smaller opponent, right? We're talking about a much smaller opponent. And any boxing critic that has looked at Wilder will tell you that his technique is not great. He has good technique on a single punch, and pretty much, everything else is not really there. It just really isn't there. So that's the one great thing about Wilder, and I think that he's done for the self-defense community. As a boxing, fan, he really brought excitement, and he will continue to bring excitement. And what Wilder and his fans need to come to grips with is that if he wants to continue on, he's going to have to add things to his game. He's going to have to become a better boxer. It's just flat out, that's what it is. He's getting older. His punching power is not going to get more. It's actually going to diminish with time. Okay? That's the reality. And honestly, at this point, not only do I think Tyson Fury won the first fight, but I also saw Tyson Fury whoop him in the second fight. I'm really not that interested at this point in seeing a third fight between the two. I actually would rather see Fury Joshua, right? I would rather see Fury and pretty much a plethora of other heavyweights before seeing Wilder. Until I see Wilder come back and show that he has developed something that is going to give Fury problems. Because Fury exposed that if you're the much bigger man against Wilder, if you put him on his back foot and you have that relentless pressure of just pushing him back, using your footwork to continue to take angles as you're pushing him back, he just does not have an answer for that. He doesn't have a footwork answer to it. He doesn't have a striking answer for it. He just doesn't have an answer for it. And I would assume that most heavyweights, given that Wilder is a smaller heavyweight, have seen that and they will attempt to duplicate that. But anyhow, kind of sad to see that he's not reflecting and really looking back at what his shortcomings are. It really does feel like Wilder and his fans are trying to find excuses for why he lost, rather than just accepting that it wasn't their night. They got bested by a better boxer with a better game plan, and going back to the drawing board. That's what I would have loved to see. But I don't know. We'll see. Will this be the end of Wilder, or will he get back up onto that horse and give us some more fantastic shows? I guess it'll yet to be seen. So we have Jon Jones responding to the Glover Teixeira win, and Jon, jokingly calls him the new GOAT. So if you are a UFC fan, you are probably aware that Jon Jones has stepped away from the 205 championship, the light heavyweight championship, and basically Jan Blachowicz is now the new 205 champ. And just this past Saturday, there was a fight between Glover Teixeira and Thiago Santos at 205, most likely for a number one contender slot. Not too long ago, Santos fought Jon Jones, fought him to a decision, was really doing pretty damn well up until he hurt his leg. And after he hurt his leg, it was, just a kind of downhill effort. It was just all he could do to survive um, the rounds with Jon. Um, if you don't know, Jon Jones has also fought Glover Teixeira, and he's beat Glover Teixeira. So Jon Jones weighs in a little bit. Looks like he is staying up with what's happening and what's going on with the 205 weight class, even though he's seemingly stepped away and is going to go up to heavyweight. But he had some things to say via Twitter this past weekend after Teixeira won. Of course, he was impressed with Teixeira, as I think all of us were, when he was able to survive some of the massive blows that he took, put him down a couple times. Santos looked like he was going to finish Teixeira a couple of times, and Teixeira was able to get the fight into, an area where he was more comfortable, and particularly on the ground, was able to bait Santos to come on down to the ground with him, and was able to finish Santos on the ground. So, in my opinion, and I think in a lot of people's opinion that watch the fight, Santos made some tactical errors, particularly following Teixeira to the ground. I think everybody watching the fight probably was thinking, what are you doing? You're winning the fight on your feet, and why not force Glover to stand back up and pick him apart on the feet? Because he was the much faster, much quicker, much more accurate striker on their feet. So, but all that being said, just a few tweets from good old Jon Jones. And, Jon says, I'm proud to have beat this guy. I like him. And then he goes on a little bit more, and he's like, Glover, the new GOAT. I don't know. I think that's kind of a jab at the Khabib fans and the people who, launched Khabib over Jon as a pound for pound number one. Jon, doesn't like the idea that there's so much recency bias in MMA, but unfortunately there is a ton of recency bias. So I think he's just kind of poking fun, and he says, "Y'all have a good night. Somebody give this man his shot." Now this is where Jon is actually very, very. I mean, he's saying things kind of tongue in cheek, or it seems that way. But he is dropping some truth here. He says, "So glad I don't have to read tweets about running from Santos. If he would have won, everyone would be talking mad trash tonight." I think that that's 100% true. I think if Santos would have won that fight, that would have vaulted him into the number one contender slot. And like I said, he was doing fairly well against Jon Jones in their first matchup. Because of that, people would want to see that rematch and would accuse Jon of running, right? Now, I'm not the biggest Jon Jones fan, okay? I'm not going to sit here and say that I don't think that, he's never lost a round or whatever. I think that he is a very, very amazing fighter, but I'm just not a huge Jon Jones fan. But that's okay. I can still appreciate his work and what he does and his greatness. I think that sometimes as fans we get spoiled with the greatness of certain athletes. We see these athletes, we get so used to them performing at an A plus premium level that anytime they compete below that A plus premium, right? That that cut above the rest. When they are not at that level for every single performance, fans tend to, you know, be disillusioned and think that somehow this guy is just, oh, he's slipping. He's just not that good anymore. When, in fact, even his, you know, B game is most people's A game. Even most people within his own uh, ranks, right? Even people within his own sphere of competition, his peers, if you will. His B game is still as good as some people's A game. So I think we get a little bit spoiled by that, and I think that Jon's kind of pointing that out. It's definitely true. Now, here's the thing. What does this mean for the 205 weight pound division? Is Izzy coming up to fight Jan? Is that a finalized deal? Is that exactly what's going to happen? Or is there room for Glover to get his shot at Jan? Here's my thoughts. My thoughts are, again, and I said this, I think, last week. I think it's a very, very bad idea to have Izzy jump up to 205 at this time. There is plenty of fights at middleweight that Izzy can fight. Okay, one of my biggest critiques or I guess complaints or however you want to put it together about Khabib is the fact that he never gives rematches. He never rematches. You know, one of the telling metrics of a great champion is rematching against somebody who at any point in the fight showed glimpses or glimmers or through the fight pushed you to the very end of the fight. This is why the Gustafsson 2 fight was so impressive and to me really sealed the deal for Jon Jones as far as his greatness. This is why the Daniel Cormier knockout, even though later it was expunged from the record, and I get that, pointed to how much better Jon Jones is than DC. Because they weren't, you know, it wasn't, the first fights were big battles, right? I think Jon in the first fight against DC probably beat DC more handily than he beat Gustafsson. I really do believe he lost to Gustafsson in that first fight. As I was scoring the fight, I had it going to Gustafsson, but that's neither here nor there. That is not what happened. So I believe that fight was much closer, right? But when Jon then fought Gustafsson the second time and just dominated him in the second fight, fought DC, knocked him out. These really put the punctuation mark, right? I don't think people appreciate how hard it is to face somebody that you've beaten before and that is now familiar, understands the jitters, the intimidation, the unknowing, the not knowing how fast you really are, is much, much different. And we see this more so in team sports than in combat sports, right? We see that, you know, a lot of times, like for instance, teams that match up, or sports where we have teams match up a lot of times, more than one time in the season, for instance, NFL football, we'll see teams split, you know, all the time. You know, we see this happen, or you see where maybe somebody won the last matchup and then they meet up into the playoffs, and it's just a few weeks later. Not a whole lot more has changed, but it's so tough at that high level of athlete to beat somebody 2 times in a row, 2 times back to back that you've faced them, right? It is so tough to beat them. And why? It's because everybody learns, everybody adapts. So with Izzy, I really feel like, the Robert Whitaker fight would do a lot for Izzy. I understand that Robert isn't wanting to fight today, but I think that's reasonable. I really feel like the UFC needs to back off of some of its top stars and top contenders. It's burning these guys out. It really is. It's burning these guys out. You cannot have these guys in training camp 365 days a year. There has to be a time for them to rest, relax, heal, and learn. There has to be, right? And you've seen it, and we're seeing it more and more. Guys who take some time off because of injury or whatever, when they come back, it's starting to become more of a trend that they look better. Brian Ortega, for instance, he looked amazing, so much better after taking the time off that he did. He is not the same fighter. He's not the same fighter. He had time to rest, recuperate, heal, and learn. And that makes for a much better, more entertaining product for the customer, the fan. But that's just my opinion, guys. That's what I got. So Jon Jones, hopefully we'll see his debut at heavyweight soon. Um, I don't know who they'd match him up with. I really don't know. I hope they don't throw him right away with the Killers. I hope they give him, a number 10 guy or a number 12 guy or something like that first. Number 15, let him dip his toe into the water, if you will, and, do it the right way and allow him to get his feet under him. I think it would serve the fans base very well to watch Jon Jones kind of have 1 or 2, maybe 3 fights before throwing him up into the number 2, number 1, champion level fights. But that's what I got, guys. And let's go ahead and move on to our last subject. Okay, guys, so last segment of the show, and basically, I'm going to tackle a topic that, for whatever reason, a lot of people seem to want to stay away from, and that's the idea of 10th Planet Jiu Jitsu, and the idea that, as you can see here on their site, that they have black belts. And given the fact that 10th Planet is a non-gi style of grappling, is it time for 10th Planet to step away from the idea of giving out belts, right? White belt, blue belt, purple belt, brown belt, black belt. I don't see a need for a belt when you wear a rash guard. And is it fair to say that you are a purple belt in jiu-jitsu when you have not rolled in the gi, and when you do not roll in the gi, and when primarily you roll no gi? Now, I'm asking this question because recently I've rolled with a blue belt whom is considered to be very, very good in a lot of the local scene. When he rolls no gi, he is an amazing, tactician. He has a great leg game, which he spins to quite often. Um, and you have to be very, very aware. A lot of setups, very, very sneaky, very fluid. That being said, after rolling with this blue belt in the no-gi and, really having to watch, what I was doing, being very careful, having to be very defensive, very cross my T's, dot my I's. Um, we put on the gi a little later. He wasn't so happy to put on the gi. He's not really into the gi that much. Um, but some of his, you know, fellow schoolmates that were with him wanted to roll in the gi, so everybody decided to put on the gi. And the transformation that happened, the level of jiu-jitsu once the gi was applied, was completely different. The ability to slow him down, the ability to pass his guard, once getting to a good position, holding that position, it was night and day. He was a completely different grappler. And not to diminish him, he was still, of course, a blue belt level. But keep in mind that he was probably like a brown belt level in the no-gi, like as far as the amount of trouble that I had with him, the amount of bad positions he put me in. And once the gi was put on, he was back to probably, it was almost like, it powered him down, and he was a more traditional blue belt. And it made me wonder, as more and more I see 10th Planet and they give out belts, and I've seen the belt ceremonies, it makes me wonder, is it time for 10th Planet to no longer consider itself jiu-jitsu? Maybe be 10th Planet Grappling? Is it time for 10th Planet to back away from the traditional jiu-jitsu ranking system, maybe come up with some other ranking system? Because belt seems to imply, when somebody tells me that they are a black belt in jiu-jitsu, I expect that their jiu-jitsu is at a high level, a black belt level in the gi and in no gi. However, what I've found is people who are very heavily leaned towards no gi competition, or heavily leaned towards no gi competition or gi competition, whichever it may be, their jiu-jitsu outside of that is not as strong. The difference being that having a belt ranking system when you wear a gi makes sense. So even if somebody was not a high level or as high a level in no gi, let's say their game diminishes quite a bit when they take the gi off. To me, the gi is much more tied to the belt than the rash guard. And I'm just wondering, is it time? Now, this isn't to say that 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu, to say that it's not good or it's not useful or it's not effective. Okay? That's not what I'm saying here. That's not what I'm arguing here. What I'm arguing is that the same way that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu became its own entity, right? Gracie, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, whichever you want to use. And to me, for this argument, they're interchangeable. It came from judo and kind of became its own entity, right? Judo had came from Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. So Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, judo, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, and it became its own entity. Is it time now that 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu, has it evolved far enough away from the original roots of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that it should now be its own style, its own thing? Um, should it be 10th Planet Grappling Systems or 10th Planet Grappling? And use a completely different ranking system rather than saying belts. I don't know if they, black shirt, brown shirt, I don't know, rash guard, whatever, because it just doesn't seem to be very descriptive. And given that 10th Planet seems to be so heavy, their system seems to be so heavy on being descriptive, right? This is the whole reason why Eddie Bravo believes in naming positions and naming, techniques, is so that he can communicate effectively with people that he is teaching. Great idea. It's a super, it's a awesome idea. I think it's, you know, I wish more coaches were concerned with it. But because, it has evolved, has it come far enough away from its roots in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu that 10th Planet should no longer be 10th Planet Jiu Jitsu and maybe should be 10th Planet, whatever, grappling, 10th Planet, I don't know, Jew, 10th Planet Jits, I don't know. But it should maybe be something completely different than Jiu-Jitsu, because there are a lot of positions in 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu that have been discovered via playing with the rubber guard that just were not positions that had names or that were really explored in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So it's just one of the questions I have. And like I said, it also, having a certain belt level, because it is so associated with the gi, it lends itself to this idea that you should be proficient in the gi at that particular level as well. And I can speak from anecdotal evidence that just because somebody is very good without the gi doesn't mean they're good with the gi. And, some people may argue this, but the reality is that it's the fact. I mean, for instance, when you bring a wrestler into a jiu-jitsu school, if you allow that wrestler to start off in no gi, many times it feels like, wow, they maybe understand what they're doing. The minute you put a gi on them, the minute you allow the realisticness of being able to grab a hold of somebody's clothes, it changes their game. Their game does not become as effective. And that's what I've found. That's what I've found myself on a personal level, my anecdotal evidence. And I've seen it time and time again. So I tend to believe that that's true. That if you, put on the gi and you allow that to happen, anytime somebody is maybe a good wrestler, has wrestled in high school, maybe low level Division 1 or low level college, I should say, and you put a gi on them, it really does changes a lot of what they're able to do. And that's even with, a schmo or a Joe jiu-jitsu player. Not talking about the highest level guys, talking about the Joes like myself. So, anyhow, that's what I got, guys. Hope you all enjoyed the show. We're going to be putting together some stuff. Really sorry that this show was a bit late this week. Super busy, a lot of things going on. Hopefully some cool changes coming forward. And that's what I got, guys. So, remember, be practical, be purposeful, get fit with a purpose.
It's my race, it's my weight, it's because I'm a Christian. I hate the internet and anyone who has an opinion. And everybody angry if you say white. Okay, fine. Pass me the brush and I'll paint my face to the shades right. Let's talk about abortion. Sorry, tell me how this works. Bacteria is life on Mars, but a heartbeat isn't life on Earth? Weird. People are so stupid.